Hey everybody, today I want to talk about fatherhood, so men and fatherhood in particular. I mean, you could talk about parenthood, unfortunately now, as a thing. Let's ditch this one. Yeah, I ain't got no hair. But fatherhood. Ever since I became a father, I always wanted to be a father, but like ever since I became a father, it's been kind of like so clear how important fatherhood is. And that is such a huge mystery that becoming a parent in general and a father in particular has become such a thing that people are afraid of. It seems to be, it's clearly not marketed to the young people nowadays. Like it used to be, let me rewind a little bit. You often get shit when you say stuff like, but women, don't they want to be mothers? And, oh, why should we? The only thing we're good for is popping out kids? Like, and it's that's an insane response for the female side. I don't know if I get through this in this video or a different one, but that's insane as well. But like, it didn't just used to be that women needed to have children. Men wanted to have children as well. Like, creating offspring was like the most important thing for both men and women historically in, I don't know, maybe almost every culture. And it's so bizarre to me how we've cut into a place in the West and apparently across the entire industrialized world. So not just the Western world, the entire industrialized world has problems with like having not enough people, basically, which is weird because we always told that the world's going to be full. And now the next problem is population collapse for a lot of countries. The weird thing is that for men, let's take the men, it used to be raised in a way that you're going to have to build a family. So you're going to have to be a man to be able to have a wife. Like, you're going to have to prove yourself, like we talked about with the relationships. Other guys will grill you, her father, her brothers, all that stuff, whether you're man enough. And then one of the goals was to create offspring so your name could live on. Now, everybody's been kind of fooled into thinking like your career is somehow your slave, wage slave system that'll make you pay taxes and spend money on a lot of useless stuff in the entertainment industry and keep the capitalist machine rolling. That is somehow going to be your greatest identifier and your greatest, not just your greatest form of self-identification and your greatest form of pleasure and satisfaction in your life, which it's clearly not for most people. Like, the few people who are lucky enough to work on something they really love and really enjoy, and so far it's not just, well, I'm having fun in my work, but in such a sense that it kind of like becomes this higher calling, kind of, almost. That's very few people that have that. And even for those people, your career is not going to be there your entire life. Like, what's going to be like this hot zone of your career? What, like 30s, 40s, 50s? When you get older, if you still want to keep doing that, you lost in life. You missed something. Or you're doing something like extremely Martin Luther King kind of special. Or you just kind of have no more friends and relationships and you just kind of working your ass off. And that's exactly the thing. Like, not having kids means you're going to be extremely lonely later on in life. I like how Jordan Peterson emphasizes this as well, but it is interesting to think about, especially that we're getting older. If you could expect, more or less, that people will become 80 years old. Let's just say 80, but maybe even 80, 90. What if you become 80 years old? And in the Western world, you retire around 65, 67, something like that. That means you still have you still have a lot of time to go, like 13 years there. But like, you're not going to be like banging your career like until you're 60, 65, 67, right? Like you're going to be very, very lonely because everybody else is having kids. Although the group that is not having kids is growing now a lot. But what kind of bugs me, let's focus on, instead of I can focus on that part, but I want to focus a bit more about the man side of this, the manhood side of this. What I've really noticed is that being a husband, right, laying your life down for your wife, and having a family, laying your life down for your children, having to discipline them, to teach them about life, to prepare them. You have to basically have to be a coach for them to live life. It is like such an important step in maturation, and like what children will automatically do. I think Peterson also said something like this, like your life is no longer about you. And that's a very, very healthy thing. It's not about you. And this society has become so incredibly narcissistic, so incredibly self-centered, but that even people in relationships like marriages, they're like, yeah, I'm just going to do me. I just want somebody next to me, and you're going to do you. And that's why people get divorced, because they're not going for the same goal. They're not sacrificing to each other. They're not dying to themselves to create a greater or new whole like you would do in any other situation, such as in a company or in a team, a sports team. In every other situation, the sacrificing part of yourself to become something greater together is like normal. But now we think in relationships, that's not like, you just got to do you. Like who's going to do, like, oh man, just the sound of that. And it's such sickening advice, because you get like this eternal focus on yourself will keep you unhappy just perpetually. You can have pleasure, quote unquote, but that's not the same as being happy. Like you can get like a dose of this and go drinking and try to keep that high. Eventually you'll run out because you've done most of the stuff, where everybody else has a family and you're just kind of like the lonely guy at the bar still wanting to party up, you know. But it's like, what I hate about this society, I guess the West in general, I don't know how far the problem spreads across the world, is just that there's no incentive to mature. And that's what I think, so that's why fatherhood is the call to mature. You would say getting married should already be a huge call to maturation, but unfortunately that's not always the case. But it used to be, you're going to work towards that. For a woman, you're going to be a mother. For a man, you have to be a father. You have to work towards that. And the things that it'll take out of you, it's just, I want to encourage young men and just inspire them to be like, men are looking for a challenge. Men are looking for something that they can prove their value in. Like way more than women, men get their value out of what they do, and whether they deliver something that matters, whether they have some type of responsibility where it works the same for women, but it manifests in a different way. Like to be able to work for something, to be, I think that's what God calls us to be self-sacrificial servants, basically, for the family. And there's something that ignites something in you as a human being and as a man, if you can lay down your life for a worthy cause and use all of your strength and go to the limits of yourself to go build something and to build a family. It's the only thing that's going to outlast you. Like the idea that you could be so successful in your career that you're going to be remembered like forever, that's like extremely rare. Like how many people you know from the 12th century, for example, you know? And time's just going to eat all that up, even if it's 10 years after you live. But then especially in this era right now when information is so overloaded, people are going to forget everybody, basically. Most people are just going to be forgotten, which is okay. The thing that lives on, quite literally, like a child, if you raise a child, then there's another human being. And the beautiful thing is not just you, it's you and your wife, or your husband if you're a woman. And together, your values, your way of looking at the world, your spirit, you could say, the way you operated in the world, sure, they will add something of their own. They're unique human beings as well, but you can build something in them that will carry on that spirit of the family, like, for years to come in a way that nothing else can. So I really don't know. Yeah, again, I think the shift in narcissism and self-centeredness is like a huge reason why people stay away from kids. Like this, and I get it. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that all these people are not me. No, I'm saying for me as well. Self-centered, narcissistic. It's our world trains you to be like that. Our technology trains you to be narcissistic, trains you to be self-focused. Everything is about your page and the way you want it, your preferences, and tweak this and that. I mean, there's all these benefits, of course, but we become so self-centered, and there's so little friction and struggle. I'm not saying people don't struggle in life, but no, not in a good way. Like there's just shit happening to everybody. Like people get sick in your family, you lose a job, you don't have enough money, stuff like that. But I mean, there has to be a willing yield to a life of virtue. There has to be a concrete goal, right? Like when people, again, I like sports, want to win a championship, they have to sacrifice, they have to work, they have friction, they have struggles, but it's the struggles in the context of going somewhere. I think most people now that having struggles are just people on a boat in the middle of the sea, and it's just like the waves will take me wherever I want without a sail, and it's just like, oh shit, the waves are just hitting me left and right. It's not. It feels like there's a lot of suffering that's wasted, in a sense of that suffering could have transformed you in a more beautiful human being, but it feels like the way we deal with these problems, drown them in entertainment, not think about them, just keep yourself completely numbed by the entertainment, or go do whatever, drink it away, whatever. There's no call to it. I mean, the success of Jordan Peterson, I said this before, is an embarrassment to the church. It's great that it's happening, but it's an embarrassment to the church. It shows how hungry people are, and it's also, especially young men. I think especially young men looking for a father figure, how hungry people are to receive that calling. To just, what should I do to be a man? And we talked about this with there's no clear example of manhood anymore for a lot of people. So it's not strange that people are backing away from having children, because in a way, it's terrifying. Of course it's terrifying. It's like a video game with no extra lives. But that's also why you should embrace it. And sure, there's something to be said about being, in some sense, ready, but there's this ridiculous notion of we're not ready because one of us is still studying, but we have wealthy parents, we both have our own place. I'm like, come on, you know how people brought up children in the world for thousands of years? And it's not, if now you're not ready enough, you're never going to be ready enough, because it's absolutely ridiculous how much resources we have compared to most of humankind ever. In history, mankind, it's so bizarre. Sure, there's people in situations where you're like, maybe not kids right now, right? But I would say that's more if you're completely immature, right? There's some maturity level you need. But the beautiful thing about kids is it also forces you to become mature in a way that nothing else will. Not marriage. Marriage will also do that for a huge way, you living with somebody else, especially if you're really given to the idea of, I'm going to lay my life down for that person, and it's not just, hey, we had a party and now we're here. But if you really do it with the spirit of marriage, then that will definitely also be a huge maturation step, because it's a commitment. And that's the thing that's lacking so much in this culture, a commitment, a contract, a covenant, right? The thing about marriage being forever, that makes it powerful as a tool of change, because it forces you make the absolute best of this, because this is going to take a long time. So if you were like, well, you can always get divorced, then you're already not approaching marriage in that way as an eternal covenant, right? That's why it's sacred, I think. It's because it is strange to say, I'm going to shackle myself to this person that I actually don't really know. But that's the beauty of it. That's what God does. God is basically giving you a taste of this is what I'm doing. This is, God just has these covenants here. How Jesus comes to the world. Here is, I'm offering my side of the covenant. You want to take it, right? I'm going to keep my end of the deal, even if you're not completely. And it's basically God's way of loving, covenant love. You see that in the Old Testament. Every time somebody gets closer to God and in a sense becomes a friend of God, or has a deeper relationship, there's almost always some type of covenant that God goes like, I'm going to do this. And you say you're going to do this. And then often when people fail this, God is still keeping his covenant, love. And it's teaching us to love deeper, but it's like C.S. Lewis, I think, said, when people said, like, I don't know how to love, act as if you did, and you will learn how to love. Like, act as if, like, I don't know how to love my neighbor, act as if you did love him, and you'll learn to. Like, we all don't know how to love, right? Like, but we do, like, if we think about what would be best for that person, I guess that's a good question to ask. You can learn how to love, right? And not having a back door in marriage is, I think, a beautiful part of that, an important part of that. Just like with, again, the team, the championship, the coach, the players, they will hold you accountable. No, this was what we said. This was the goal. We are going to do this, whether you like it or not. You're going to fight through this. And of course, in sports, you can be off the team, all that type of stuff. But that's the beauty of marriage. And that is the beauty also of having children. It's like the ultimate... Unfortunately, it's not. It should be the ultimate commitment, right? Like, you're already committed to stay with somebody for life, and then you say, now we're going to create these little beings that are just going to be around, God willing, until we die. For always, I'm going to be a parent now. Like, I'm turning the switch on, and for always, this is going to be like that, you know? And God forbid if nothing horrible happens. Like, and that is so... That is a responsibility that I can understand that men are afraid of. And that's the weird thing, like, I think men, above all, need responsibility and accountability in the sense of, I don't know, who was it that said that men are like trucks, they drive more straight when you put weight on them. I like that. It's like, men want to have something, they want to matter in some sense. And it doesn't need to be, not everybody needs to be Martin Luther King or like some fabulous athlete or something. It could be a simple job, but it's like, my family depends on me. Let's go. It doesn't really matter what the job is, you know. And that's a very good thing. And I think it's not just that. Like, what children will do to you, again, you have to be, if you think about the 3 roles as a man you can have, you could be a son, a brother, or a father. Just kind of like, if you get what I mean. You can be a son, somebody who is discipled, somebody who's taught, who's mentored. You can be a brother, somebody who, together with other brothers, hopefully, has a brotherhood and can lean on each other, inspire each other, encourage each other to be like, go. But we also have to be fathers. We have something to give, and to have somebody dependent on you, somebody that you should steer. They always say you learn something the best when you're able to explain it, when you're able to teach it. Well, as a father, you're going to have to explain everything about life, everything. Why is it good to be respectful? Why is it good to be patient? And then you'll quickly learn, oh man, I'm really not that patient at all. Then these kids will just force patience out of you. They will make all the ugliest shit and you just come straight to the surface. And so why is it good, both marriage and having kids, is it forces you to go through this maturation process. And now, especially in the West, in the wealthier parts of the world, there is really nothing else that will force you to mature. You can be a child and be 36, and you see it all over the place. People are still just thinking about, I just want to have fun, and I just want to... And I'm not talking like I'm not part of that. Like, I am part of that. I feel that, especially now when I got married and when I'm having kids. All this is being purged out of me right now. But it's so good that it's being purged out of me because it's such an ugly side of mankind, and it's such an ugly thing, I think, for men, especially, to be spoiled kids. It's just such a waste. It's such a waste of strength. It's such a waste of your prime. Like, people were having kids younger, and then both men and women would be in the prime of their lives. They would be in their strength, which you're going to need with kids. Now people are just pushing it off, for the sake of some career. And it's just so weird. I mean, there's other factors, of course, playing a role. I like a cost of living, so people are stressing out, can I afford having kids? And this is also something I just want to bitch about a little bit. Like, it's like, yeah, I don't know if I'm able to afford that, to have every kid have their own room and their own phones. Like, bro, this is, again, like this artificial standard of living that you've placed on having kids. Like, I think my dad was like, like we're 6 of them at home, and just small little home. People just bunk up, like they have bunk beds and stuff. Like, it's not weird. Like, it's just what you make of it. Like, oh yeah, because we don't have a front yard and a backyard, and we don't have this and that. I get it. I mean, we were in a small apartment with like 2 rooms, and we had 2 kids, and yeah, it gets crowded. But it's like, but what gets crowded out is just your kind of entitlement for how you think you should be able to live. It's again, this is not simple. Like, it's your spoiled self being wrung out of you. Like, it's not about you. You as a family, make it work. 1 room, 2 rooms, 3 rooms, apartment, house. Again, it doesn't have to be nice. I love the story about Giannis Antetokounmpo, famous NBA star now. I think Nigerian descent, grew up in Athens, like, and they were sleeping like with the 4 of them in one bed, right? Like, I'm not saying that's ideal, and I'm not trying to glorify poverty or anything like that. I mean, I'm sure he's happy now that he's making money and get his family out of there, but he did say, like, it made his family like this, right? Like, we have to make it through, and that builds something that human beings spend so much money and time on trying to buy, but you can't buy. You can't buy true community. You can't buy deep relationships. You can't buy meaning and purpose in your life. And I love that story. It's a nice rags to riches story. Everybody loves that, right? Like, they go from selling trinkets on the street to being a famous NBA star, getting his brothers in the NBA, living very well right now. But you see, if you see him even as a person and his character, you see what that forged, what his parents forged. And I don't think it is sure, it is the spirit of his parents, the discipline of his parents, but it's also this. It's also together they built something despite the hardships. And people don't get, like, if you talk to people like who've been like on, you read Infused, not like I know them, people who've been like very successful, like NBA champions and stuff, like in their craft, like they've been the best at what they do. And you sometimes hear like retired people, even when they didn't win championships, like, oh, that team, that just made such an impact on me, of really basically doing most of their life. I mean, they see them teammates more than their families often, of doing life together, the privilege of being able to really share your life with a group of people. And that's the thing with having kids. Like, if you have kids, especially 2, 3, 4, if you have kids, it's like you're building a little village, and you're building the relationships that I think it was also Jordan who said that, like, these things love you more than anything in the world. These things, like they're best. These kids will love you more than anything in the world. By default. Which is insane. This unconditional love we're looking for, like all our lives, that you hopefully maybe get in a mother, but they're also wounded. Kids have that. Kids will love you, like, if you just give basic attention. It's so painful sometimes how simple this actually is. Don't get me wrong. It's maybe what they say. It's simple, but not easy, in a sense of it's not complex, but it'll pull a lot out of you. Like, it'll transform you in that sense. But it's not rocket science. Like, everybody, in some sense, intuitively knows. I think we stress out about the stuff we think we should know more. And sure, I mean, I worked in like user experience design, gamification, so I know a lot about behavioral psychology. I know there's a lot of like knowledge about that could definitely help you. I'm working on like courses about that to help people kind of think through these basic concepts. We do need some handholds. It's not like, yeah, just go do it. But in the same sense, but in like the other side of the coin is people have been doing this for thousands of years. And sure, some people have messed up pasts, but we're still here as mankind. Why? Because we're built to do this, you know? We can do a worse job, we can do a crappy job, we can do a good job, but look, we're still here. We've produced kids, we've raised people successfully enough to still be alive here, right? And we're in one sense, I mean, it feels like the world is kind of on the edge of going in a real bad direction maybe, but we also shouldn't forget that in some sense, it's the best. This might be the most abundant time ever in human history. Probably the safest time in human history. You know, like all these things. Like there's less wars, there's less people, like the percentage of in absolute poverty and starving, there's more people having access to education, higher education, to drinking water, to food, like all that stuff. I mean, we got a lot of issues to work out, and it could go really bad if we don't fix them, but it's hard to forget how life was like 500, 600 years ago, right? For the average person and the average person now. And again, I'm speaking from a privileged position of being born in the West, that even if you're just middle class, even if you're like a little above poor in the West, that's a lot better than being poor in a lot of other places. I mean, still, it's not nice, but we're doing, in some sense, really good, but we just shouldn't mess it up right now. We should keep pushing. But yeah, I feel like a lot of that is falling apart because we are throwing out a lot of values. We're throwing out a lot of, I think the secularization of the West is really going to be its downfall if it doesn't turn around. And there needs to be something in a society where people are being told that your greatest goal is not you. And the greatest thing that you can give yourself to is above you. And there is something above you, not just in a moral way, which is, I think, a very important aspect. Like, you have to yield to a higher standard that you can't just make up. There's a standard above you that will, in some sense, enforce you to yield yourself to virtue, right? Like, God is the Father and He's the judge, right? Like the Father, the disciplining Father, right? Like, He's the Father, like, come here. But especially also, like, if you see how God, like in ancient times, the Father is also the one you fear in a good, like, respect. In a good sense, and that's especially the case with God. I think we talked about that in the last episode. Like, this side is unfortunately left out in Christianity a lot. Like, this side of God as the discipliner, the guy who will not let his kids escape without discipline, so to say. Like, it has this verse about do not grow weary when of the discipline of the Lord, or be weary when you're being reproved. Do not despise the discipline of the Lord, or be weary when reproved by him, because that makes you legitimate sons, which is very interesting, right? Like, because He disciplines you, He's like, He cares about you walking in the right way. He cares about you becoming the best version of yourself. So He will discipline you. And that side left out, like, there's no, in a secular atheistic world, again, I don't think most people are actually atheists when you push them, but they function as atheists in the sense of that they don't really yield to a higher standard in that sense. All in a little sense, like everybody does in some sense, has this idea of morals, but when push comes to shove, do you really fear God then of going over this board, or will you be saving your ass, right? Like, and because we don't have that anymore, people make up their own rules. So it's almost inevitable that becomes an incredibly self-centered society, because it's just you and your rules. You're just going to make up what you're going to do. You're going to do something that pleases you. You're going to do something that's easier for you. If somebody could decide their own, like, there's very, 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 very few people that you could just leave completely on their own and, like, yeah, make your own work regimen and go for the championship. Like, people need coaches. People need people that hold them accountable. They need systems. They need discipline. They need a rhythm. They need a routine. Like, there's so much that goes into being good and successful in anything, let alone, like, life itself, like becoming a full human being. So I think that's one of the big issues. And not yielding to virtue, I think, has also subverted that path to fatherhood. Because fatherhood is clearly one of the easiest accessible paths to everybody to go force yourself to become disciplined. Force yourself to be mature. So it's robbing a lot of men of purpose, of not pursuing fatherhood. Because think about it like that. If you remove, it's kind of like a chain. If you remove the desire for fatherhood, and the same for women with motherhood, you actually remove the drive to even become basically capable or mature enough to even start that journey, right? Which means if you don't do that, then you now, as you see right now, there's also less incentive to become that person, to actually become a good partner. Like, there's a lot of people like, oh, I'm a 10, I'm a 10. I don't need anybody. Somebody needs to see me for me and respect me fun. Get the hell out of here. Nobody wants that shit. That's like, oh man. It's interesting to talk about it like a chain. Like, the goal is no longer fatherhood. So you don't need to be that mature. Like, you don't need to have all that, your finances in order. You don't need to be self-controlled in some sense. You don't need to be, we call it like stoic in some sense, that you can control your emotions, because there's going to be not an emotional monster in your house. You're going to need to keep it under control, not just for your kids. You need to be there for your wife. You need to be able to push through in hardship. Like, you need to be already there, like, oh, wow. So I need to have some sense of emotional maturity. I already need to have some grip on life in being able to take responsibility of making sure there's any type of money that I'm able to work. So being able to yield the work also means that I'm able to divide, like, my energy into just me time and stuff that just needs to be done, right? And again, if I want to be a father, I need a partner. So I also need to be desirable as a partner. So I need to see what the women want, what the women desire, like a man who is at least partly takes care of himself. I'm on the wrong end of the spectrum here, fellas. My ladies help me change. But like, I need to be presentable in something. I need to be able to listen. So I need to be, it's not about me. I need to be able to ask questions. I need to have a woman be able to trust me. So I need to be trustworthy. All that type of stuff. Like, these are all incentives that came from wanting to have offspring, right? Like, it's like this little trickle down. And you remove that, and slowly you see, why would I have a committed relationship? Like, why would I? And still, people, of course, want. But that question comes around. Like, why would I be in a committed relationship? Why would I yield myself to one person for the rest of my life? Well, it's clear you want offspring. And the absolute best case scenario for your children is to have a stable family, to have a mother, to have a father, and then be yielded to each other. That's the goal, so they can create a safe base for children around them. I mean, that's been like that historically. Sure, in some cultures they had multiple wives, but it was a man having to commit to all these people and having to, it wasn't like polyamory, which you have now, which is like zero responsibility, let's just sleep around. But like, people yielded to creating that safe base. But if you don't think about fatherhood, you think very different about partnership, right? If that's not the first thing, like the fact that people are just sleeping around with everything, we talk about this, sleeping around with everybody, we talk about this, I think this is really bad for both men and women. It's easy to call women sluts, but men are sluts too nowadays. Or whatever name you want to call them, bastards. They're sexually immoral, and they're doing damage to other women, they're doing damage to themselves, to their own journey of maturity. You're training immaturity. Oh, this is like what pisses me off. What the youth is now being taught, or the culture is kind of teaching you to train immaturity, to train giving into impulses, to train not being disciplined, right? And I saw this guy, I don't know him, apparently he was a famous YouTuber, or at least in some set, well-known YouTuber who made like a switch. I saw him in a podcast. First he was like completely reckless, and then he was actually fighting for these values. And I love to see that shift happening, because this shift needs to happen, because a lot of people are going to die alone or really unhappy. And so, again, there's like a real societal issue of people not having children. But there's, again, the bigger issue, if we can, one shift we can make, and I guess that's what I think, again, what Jordan Peterson is doing is so important, because he's giving these people a goal of go be disciplined, go yield yourself to some journey of discipline, right? Like, he's giving that goal again. So what we need to do as a society is need to elevate fatherhood again. And in a lot of cultures, it's still the thing, right? Like your life, I heard like somebody from India saying like, what about it? What a time for yourself? Like, you live for your family. Like, what are you even talking about time for yourself? You're basically waiting till you can become a parent. And that's when life starts. That's when you pour everything you have into this growing group of people, so they can stand on your shoulders, and then you can actually build the next building block. Like, you have to mature, you have to be strong, but that's just one building block. Like, that's all you can basically do. You have become a block for somebody else to put their next block on, and that's your children. Like, you could adopt, you could, in a sense, be a father to a neighborhood, right? Like, That's still really good. Maybe you can't have kids. There's people, of course, that still are. They either can't find partners, or they either they're infertile. There's people that are unwillingly without. They don't want to have. They don't want to be in that position, but they are without kids. They can still embrace a similar role in the community. It's not going to be the same, but it's still going to have some of those same benefits of maturation, right? Like, because you're going to have a lot of patience with kids. They grow older, become teenagers, and a lot of stuff. It just takes the focus off you and have you completely give yourself for another person. And that's exactly what the spirit of life is. That's what God is like. Right? God loved the world so much that he gave his only son. And what did his son, Jesus Christ, God manifested in the flesh, what kind of life did he live here? Was he like, me time? And like, I'm going to do me. He did him, but then you saw when he did me, he did it for you, right? Like, so that's the huge difference. When we do me, it's just like, let's get all these pleasure hormones pumped up, and not the real you. That's not even the real you. You're not doing you. You're doing some demonic, lustful, hungry creature feeding. That's not the real you. And I really hope you can see that that's not you. I hope that if that would be all, that would be a lonely, sad life, wouldn't it? Like, so you doing you is just being at the mercy, basically, of all these pleasure impulses around you. Yeah. I don't know, it just moved something deep in me. I always had, in some sense, that I wanted to be a father. I guess maybe in our family, because the focus was very much on family and not at all on career. Also, my parents were sick also, so that contributes to that as well. So I'm trying to heal to have a bit more of a healthier version of work, and seeing work as loving your community, like do something to be of service, to be of value, give back in that sense. So I do think it's not like work is like not important at all. It's just like this illusion that work is gonna outcompete family. That's such a silly thing. Like, think about the phases of your life, right? Like, so now, if you're a kid, you're a teenager, or you start to mature, then you should kind of be mature. Like, I love how in a lot of cultures, you could say the journey to maturity would be signaled at the start of your teenage years, like around 12, 13, like you have the bar mitzvah, you have like these tribes, of course, like you have all these trials, especially for men, that was so important. And it gave men, or like when your dad was just working a craft, you know, the son is going to be like, come on, watch dad work, and you're going to help out in the shop until you can start to do what your dad do. So you're exposed to like, this is what a man is. This is what I'm going to need to be doing. This is what I want to be. He's just busting his ass every day for the family. Like, I got to do something to help the family. I got to do something to help the community, right? Like, that kind of just conscious kind of mindset was just seared into you, I think, from a way earlier age. Like, there is no just effing your life away, just little. That, and I think a lot of the depression and the burnouts and stuff that we're seeing among youth now. I mean, I've dealt with burnouts. It's just that purposelessness. It's just that, like, you're just going doing what everybody's doing because everybody's doing it, but it's like you don't have that true mission in life. And that early on, like, people are always like, oh, well, yeah, teenagers, right? That's just a product of our this is the product of our freaking society that gives no responsibility, all freedom, no responsibility, and money early on now. What do you think is going to happen with an immature kid that's becoming an adult? Just go. That's why discipline is so important. That's like, because we don't have it, you see that people also don't enforce it on their children. The people that do have kids, they don't want to be parents. They want to be friends, right? Like, they don't want to be the coach. They want to be the peer. And that's why we are creating more and more generations. Like, people are just become so lost in these basics. You would say these basics of human life. You have to prepare your kid for life. Like, it's so weird how we would accept discipline as part of any other journey of being able to become something or do something. If you're going to be on a job, you're going to do things a certain way. You have like your work, your start time, the first 6 months. But you're going to have to conform to the rules of the company. Like, it's with everything. And now with kids, This is maybe about parenting more ranting, but might as well drop this one in as well. It's like people don't want that role. Like I said, I think it's like a chain effect. They don't have it in their lives. They're not yielded to a higher power, so they don't have it. They also don't have it on a human level. There's nobody to mentor them like that or confront them like, hey, get your shit together. There's nothing, again, maturing them. So even when they do have kids, then you often see them raising the kids the same way. Just give them a bunch of freedom, give them a lot of pleasure, and they're going to be the same spoiled brats that you were. Like the same messed up, self-centered, narcissistic people that we've become. And we got to get back to that, yielding to that mission, like to start early, like with, you're 12, 13, you have to become a man. This is what it means to be a man. And that trial thing was such a beautiful thing because it made them go through something hard. Again, responsibility and some form of suffering, actually, but a suffering that is geared towards a goal, reaching a goal. Go through something really hard and actually see what your strength is capable of. That's what men want. Men want to be strong. Give them something difficult so they can build that confidence, like, I am strong and I should use it wisely, right? Like, I should use it wisely, that strength. And we miss that in our culture. I'm already thinking like how I'm going to do that with my kids. I'm going to have some kind of thing when they're 12, 13 to introduce this, because I love that way more. It gives way more purpose to your teenage years when you have a shitload of energy when you're 16, 18 to be like, and then when you're 18, you should be ready to go into the world. And now it's just like people just go have that same teenage lifestyle up until their late 20s. Then they become 30 and they're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should start being a real man, like, and start manning up. And you see kind of, there's some toxic variants of it, but there's like different voices where you see the call to manhood and taking responsibility. I haven't seen as many female channels of like calling women to maturity, but hey, I'm not in the female YouTube bubble, so maybe they're out there. And ladies, if you are, good for you, because I could do this rant about women just as much, and exactly the same, with exactly the same kind of problem, like the lack of responsibility, lack of maturity, not having this not having this goal of like, there's going to be this goal that's not going to be about you, but we're going to need you at your absolute best to fulfill that purpose, to fulfill that responsibility. And you're going to have to be lay down a lot. So you got to have to be strong mentally, physically, emotionally. Like, yeah, man, I just also experiencing it is just like, because I see so much emptiness and I see people are suffering for it. Like everybody's kind of just smiling, oh, pouring bottles. But you see the pain behind it. Like you see this, you feel this void, this emptiness, this shallowness of life. And if you see how much joy children give you, like I said, they'll pull everything out of you. They'll make you angry, and like all your weaknesses and imperfections will either come out of you through them, or you'll see them in them because they start emulating you, and you're like, oh shit, I gotta fix this up. Like they give you so much. It's like a constant freaking mirror right in front of your face, a mirror that asks you for food all the time. And that's why a lot of people are like, oh, there's now this movement. I'd like to spit on it for a minute. Where people are glorifying being by themselves. Like if you want to be single, it's fine. But they're like glorifying that life and ridiculing people who do have kids. So they're basically glorifying narcissism and self-centeredness. Like I could slip in until 12 today. We know why. Because I don't have any kids. Then I thought, I'm just going to watch another series again, because that's so fulfilling. Then I just watch another series that I already watched and just binge that, be in my pajamas till the end of the day, and then maybe go eat out. Yeah, that sounds like purpose right there. That sounds like something people will write about in 100 years. That sounds like something your mom and dad will be really proud of. That you are still being a teenager even though you're 33. Man. And like shaming people for kids. That's like That's like such a bizarre, like, you know, that thing that makes us keep existing as a human race? Like what? And to me, it's like fascinating, especially from my kind of work background, behavioral psychology. It's fascinating that this has even come about so fast. Within like a handful of generations, we went from creating offspring is the most important thing for men and women that you could ever do. Let your name live on, especially for men, right? Like that's the thing. Like I want to have a son, my name live on. And we go to people, oh, I can sleep in because I don't have kids. Wow. It's just baffling. Like the brainwashing has worked to such an extent. It's some of it's brainwashing in the sense of like these new virtues, this new goal is being it's being pushed. It's being pushed in media, if not explicitly, then implicitly in showing what is good and desirable for main characters in books, in media, like in movies, especially in music. It's all immaturity. You see some grown man talking to teenagers like, yeah, live it up, drinking bottles. This grown man, like this guy who's also not still kind of processing his own messed up childhood apparently in front of the camera. And those become the role models to the next generation. And then, of course, social media is, so you have like active brainwashing is like the active messaging of these people, influencers that are saying stuff like that. Like, oh no, children. And I think it's especially cruel for women because they have a clock, you know, like there's a biological clock. Like as a man, sure, the quality of your semen can probably also go down, and there's a lot of stuff that is also like messing with the fertility of people and also men. But like, you could still kind of be a donkey and then be like 35 and like, oh man, I want to have a family. And then 40, you're gonna be a bit older as a parent. It's not fun, but not you wish you had that youthful energy, but you can more easily do that. That like for women, after a time, that's just like the clocks run out. Like, so it's such a messed up thing that they're being preached that message, because they're gonna run into some wall that you can't get through after a while. Either if you can't find a partner in time, or you can't. Again, you can't produce anymore. You can't become pregnant. And that's really hard, man. That's like I said, that's a long ass time. Like people used to have, I think, kids in their 20s, early 20s, maybe like sometimes people will get married at 18, have like their first kid at 19, you know, like, so this, I'm not ready, bullshit. Sorry, that's the negative side. The positive side is you can do this. Everyone has. Like almost everyone in the history of the world. That's not true. A lot of men couldn't reproduce. But anyway, a whole lot of people, millions, billions of people in way worse conditions than you have done this. Like, yes, of course you can. Of course you can. You're a human being. You're a man or you're a woman. You're made for this. You're built for this. It's one of the core phases of your life. Again, to be discipled, to be a child, become an adult, and then become the father or the mother that gives back. Those three phases are all important for you to become a complete human being. Sure, there's some people called, like Jesus says, some people are called to be eunuchs for the kingdom of God. Like Apostle Paul wasn't married, no kids, he just gave everything he had for God. But he still lived that selfless life. So you could say he was, in a sense, married to God, in a sense that he was doing the similar things that lead to maturation that you would do in a marriage or in the context of children, right? Like, he was not like just doing him. He was laying down his life for other people, building something, yielding to a greater cause than himself. But there are very few people are called to that. Like, your mission is going to have to be like Martin Luther King type mission for you. Even he had a family, right? Like, I mean, like really big to be like, nah, maybe not kids for me, right? Most people, okay, this is double. Most people should have kids. I'm not saying that. There's a lot of people now that maybe should not have kids because of that immaturity, but you should have kids in a sense of that would be the absolute best for your journey to maturity as a human being. Unfortunately, a lot of people are lagging on that journey, so you would say to a lot of people, you should not have kids, right? Which is an absolute shame, right? But it's because they have not been conditioned and trained, brought up with that this is going to be a very important high goal of your that's it later. It was like when you were 20, right? Like it's like early in your life, because it'll change you and make you a real mature human being. And then you have even like the sage phase of your life where you're like, without less responsibility as a grandfather and still being able to pour, share your life, share your wisdom with the next generations. And to just be like, like that all important kind of evolution and ladder of maturity of human life that has kind of kept our species together. Why don't we just cut that off like right at the bottom of that thing that made you mature, and then let's just see what happens. Let's just get rid of all that, and let's think that I'm going to have a career for myself that's going to make me that same whole human being that's not just mature, but then has purpose, community, love, relationships around you, right? Like in a way, you could say, "Can I have my friends?" But a friend is never gonna ring you like a wife or a child rings you to force you to look at the sin side of yourself, the brokenness, the messed up stuff that needs to go. Like your friends, you could have some confrontational friends. Most people don't. Like good vibes, But again, the no escape factor in marriage and in parenthood and fatherhood makes that so important that you have to grow up. It's not like you could, you should, you have to, or your life's going to be miserable. You're going to have a bad marriage, or you're going to be a bad parent, and that relationship with your kid's going to be bad. But you have to mature. And I would want that. I want that for a lot of people. When I see what the youth is kind of just aiming for, what I'm going to do from when I'm 20 to 30, you're like, it's a whole lot of nothing. It's a whole lot of breaking down your body, using the best years of your life for the pleasure of the consumer society, put money in some rich guy's pocket. Yeah, just thwarting your own journey to maturity. And there might be people that can just come complain, oh, you could do without kids. There is nothing like children that will do that in the same way. Yes, if you yield to some very difficult cause, like you build $1 billion company, or you want to win some championship or be the best in the world in some field, that's gonna ask a lot of you as well. But let's not act like everybody is like that. Like everybody is some kind of super diligent top athlete. Like if everybody was like that, then we'd have like a different type of problem on our hands, a way better problem on our hands, But we don't have that. And it's like there's a difference in yielding to a craft and yielding to the craft of virtue, so to say, because like being able to do something really well, still like there's a lot of virtue that comes with that, so that's good, like you discipline, hard work, all that stuff. But there's a different dimension to dealing with a human being, like a wife or like children, that will force you to do that same thing on the moral side of you, on like your emotional side, on your spiritual side. Like that, there is just nothing that does that like children, like nothing. And because it's not just I have to become disciplined, I have to become more mature, I have to relate. This person loves me with everything they have, everything I give to them or pour into them. They're going to reflect all the good and the bad. Like I said, it's that mirror. If a path of discipline, like some difficult thing to achieve, is a dim, like a dim mirror, and this is like a very clear mirror that you cannot escape. Like, and unfortunately, people do escape, right? Like in marriages, in a sense, even within the marriage, they hide. Or fathers, that's I think also fathers if we look at fatherhood, that it's just terrifying. A lot of people didn't have fathers at all, or they had bad fathers, and then the task to become a father seems so daunting, right? Like, but again, the thing, like, your children need your attention foremost. If you're just there, if you can be diligent and say, I'm gonna block 30 minutes a day of conscious play with my kids. We try to do that at our place. Conscious play, no phones, no nothing. Conscious play. I'm going to do that. I'm going to acknowledge the things I see in them. Everything they try, I'm going to encourage them in it. And then the final thing they need from a father is discipline, in the sense of they're going to need your coaching to become mature, to be ready for the world. Like, so in a sense, the father introduces some of the threat of the world. That when you wrestle with your dad, right, like, oh, he's more powerful than me, or like, he gets you ready to defend yourself, like, you go push your kids a bit, push them around. Fathers are often a bit less careful with their kids, and they need that because the world's not going to be lovey-dovey mommy hug all the time. It's going to have a tough side, and fathers need to be there. Not that a mom couldn't do that, but there's something very natural that especially with boys and fathers, that they very intuitively and instinctively take from a man, because they have to be a man. Like, I'm going to have to be that, right? Like, so that role of discipline, that role of, in a sense, demonstrating what you will have to become to deal with the harshness of the world, to be able to be emotionally stable, to deal with setbacks and disappointments, to then still keep working. That idea of taking the responsibility, bearing the load. The first thing you do, just living it out, of course, is going to be the most important thing. They see it in you as a father, so that's why you want to yield to it. That's why you want to give yourself to it. And I'm also in this process, like I talk in the other videos, I'm also on this journey of manhood, of growing in my manhood and taking more responsibility and becoming stronger in that. But also because it feels now, the clock is ticking, like the kids are here. They're seeing me live. Every day that I'm in this sin or in this bad habit, it's something they can take over. And if I can say, I want my kids to be entrepreneurial, I want my kids to be this and that, like, you gotta be, if you want to be, right? Like, so it gives you such an incentive to change. And again, they're gonna need that discipline from you. You might spot something in, like, they like that as a kid, but then you want to add that layer of discipline. First, let them play around in it, but if they really like it, like, okay, let's do this for 3 months and see what happens if you really work at it. Then they maybe encounter the first setback of, like, this is a bit hard. Like, and if you can't give them that sense of victory of accomplishing that, right? Like, that's the thing I think fathers should give. Okay, battery's almost gone, everybody. I think I'm done ranting. Yeah, so it's just a tragedy. So if you're a man, young man, old man, yield yourself, become a father. If you're young, like I, for some reason, always had that. If you're young, I don't care if you're 14, 16, become a father. I'm not saying you have to be a father when you're 19, but if you approach life now, especially as you're in that maturation stage is not in your 20s, it's now. Like, you should be a man by your 20s, like at least a basic man. Of course, you're going to learn a lot when you're 20 and 30, but it's good if you can already have a sense of discipline and a sense of hard work. You can also just be successful also financially if you can be responsible, mature, be disciplined, have some sense of being able to talk about your emotions, but also having them under control. That's going to be immensely valuable. And if you say to yourself when you're 14, I have to become a father, you're going to approach everything differently. You're going to approach a relationship differently. You're just not just going to sleep around with any woman. You're going to think about, could this be the mother of my children? Is this woman, like, so you're not going to be involved, like, because if you give yourself to those shitty things in those relationships, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt this woman. You're going to make yourself immature. You're going to train yourself to be unfaithful, basically, which is like the opposite of what you need to be when you're a father. You're going to train yourself in some sense to run away from responsibility, which is not what you want to be training yourself for. But you're also going to keep away from bad company. Like everybody that's just, I think, again, both men and women that just open their legs and zip down their pants like that, those are not disciplined, morally virtuous people. I'm sorry to break it to you. That's, they might be in every other area of life. They're probably not. And usually that behavior usually bleeds over in some other way in your life. I'm not saying they're horrible people. Like I'm saying but it's a huge sign to me. Like it's a huge sign to me of somebody's maturity, like their values, their moral values. Where are they going in life if they just sleep around with somebody they just met? Don't do that. Give yourself to, again, because if you, like, I'm going to become a father, okay, so whoever I'm sleeping with better be at least potentially a good mother. So that means I'm going to have to relate to her more than just like boobs, tits, ass. I'd like to have sex. You're going to have to evaluate that woman in a different way. So you're training your emotional skills. You're going to have to talk. You're going to have to share your heart. You're going to have to ask questions. Like all these things will contribute to you becoming a healthy human being. Because you're like, this is the end goal. So the goal before is become a good partner. So to become a good partner, I need to be emotionally healthy. Like I need to talk. I need to be desirable. So I need to work hard. Like it will set you up for success, basically. So young men, become a father. Again, doesn't have to be 22. Although historically they did it at 22. Again, I'm not ready for this. You decide. I think my grandfather used to say, can't is won't. You say, I can't do it, it's you don't want to do it. And be fair to yourself. You don't want to do it. And if you really don't believe you can't do it, I'm saying you can do it. Like, if you're a young man, you accidentally knocked up some girl, go be a man and be a father. Take your responsibility. It'll be the best thing you ever did in your life. People used to be wet to each other. They didn't even like that whole bull crap. Like, you can learn to love somebody. Sure, there's bad matches. I'm still convinced of that. Marrying some people is like not wisdom to do that because of the kind of the way. But it used to be normal that you barely maybe even knew the person you were getting married to. And they may do. Like, not all of them may have been great, but like the fact that that's even possible shows you that marriage, that loving is a choice. If you say, I'm going to take that responsibility, I'm going to be good to you, you will learn to love that person. And that person will definitely learn to love you if you live like that. So don't be too afraid about like, oh, but what about this and like that? Like I said, be wise. That's why you shouldn't slip around. That's why I think you should get married first. First be able to commit to a woman, then commit to the family. That's the way, the better order. But if you messed up, be a father. You can do it. I don't care if you're 18, 17, 19, 20. I don't care. This will force you to become a man. So give yourself to it because you're made for it. You can become a father. And you will become a good father. If you yield to that discipline for yourself, teach them some discipline. Just be there. Attention, hug, play. Play with them. You're going to be a great father. I hope there's going to be more fathers, man. We need more fathers. We need more kids in the world. And we definitely need more fathers. So, I guess that's all I got to say. Only 1 hour.